Okay, beautiful friends. Today we're just going to do some stretching and a little mobility work. So you will want a band and two blocks. I love the elastic band, but maybe you just have a regular yoga strap. Let's do a little mobility warm up, and then we're just going to do some straight stretching today. Some long hold static stretches. Come on to all fours. Place the hands underneath the shoulders, the knees underneath the hips, and just start to take any intuitive movements as you especially focus on freeing the rib cage from the body. So maybe you want to take some barrel rolls, tucking the chin and lifting the chin, starting to move into some spinal undulations. If you're not familiar with spinal undulations, it's just leaning the weight of the body forward and back as you open and close the back body, front body in that way. And feeling it onto the wrist, perhaps we'll do a little wrist warm up as well, although we're not going to take a lot of weight on the hands today because we're literally just stretching. Tuck the toes underneath you for a second, get a little stretch on the toes. That feels good. If the wrist took any pressure, you can just start to circle the wrists out a little bit. And then grab your band. We'll do a little shoulder flossing. I'll turn this way so you can see me a little bit better. I'm still on the toes. Maybe you want to come off the toes. I love the feeling of stretching the toes, spreading the big toes apart from each other. Then stretch the arms in front of you. The arms are straight. The thumbs face one another. Inhale. The shoulders come up towards the ears, and then exhale. They come down, and then you move back and forth. And find that place that really feels good. It's really tight. And maybe hang out there for a few breaths, moving from side to side. Like I said, we're going to do a lot of static stretching here. So finding a little bit of mobility first, keeping the arms straight. I love to lift one arm and then the other, and just really feel the scapula on the back body as they lift and release. And then maybe taking some side movements here, still working to keep the arms as straight as possible. The chin is mostly neutral, and then thinking again about the rib cage. And just trying to free the rib cage, which often gets stuck either too depressed down towards the pubic bone at the front body, or maybe too open and lifted away, finding that freedom so you can move it in any direction. Rolling the head and the neck from side to side. If that stretch, if you're still on your toes, maybe that stretch was pretty intense, you can come off of your toes and just smack them on the ground a little bit to release. I can hold that a long time. We'll do a little bit of leg flossing as well. Take two blocks, have them at either side of your mat. If you're using a mat, no need to use a mat though. And then bring the right leg forward or whatever leg feels good. And just take a low lunge here for a few breaths. Really leaning into that front leg, keeping the heel of the foot on the ground if possible. And then take the block closest to that front leg back a little bit so that you have some space here. And just begin to open and close that hip. So sending the knee out to the side and then bringing it back through center. Out to the side and back through center. No need to count here. It's really intuitive today. We're not worrying too much about training or quantifying. We're really just trying to find a good, decent dose of quality feeling inside of our bodies. A few times, and then bring that block back, come back to neutral, tuck the back toes under, and then begin to straighten and bend the legs. Really think here about the front leg being the key pivot point. So it's that front leg that actually causes that back leg to move. So you're not really bending that back knee as much as bending the front knee, and the back knee will naturally come towards the ground. A few times, slow or fast. I tend to be fast. Maybe you want to hold in the straight leg position for a few breaths. Taking a few movements, flowing in and out maybe, whatever feels good. Just finding good feeling in the body today. And then coming back to that lunge position, we're just going to hold a low lunge here and maybe take it into our first quad stretch. So If it feels good, you can come down onto the elbows. Try to keep that knee tucking into the armpit, the back armpit, the front knee, and then hanging out here for a few breaths. Maybe now you want to put on some relaxing music. I'm really blessed to hear the sound of the birds, but also a little bit of the car sounds. At some point in my life, I realized that the sound of the car is just like the sound of the ocean, so it doesn't bother me. Maybe I'll do a little storytelling as we hold some of these stretches. If it feels good to move a little bit around, especially in those hip areas, dropping the hip to the right and then the hip to the left, that's something that feels nice for me. Maybe do it a few times, but then come back to static, come back to the center, holding here. You can choose to stay exactly where you are, or if you want to deepen it, we'll stay here, bending that back leg and bringing the foot in as close to the hip as possible. If you see me here, you may not be able to see very close, but my right knee wants to kick out to the side. I'm going to try to keep that right knee as neutral as possible and then hold on to the back foot here, squeezing that heel in towards the back buttock, and then recognizing that the tendency is to close the front body, instead open the front body, lifting the rib cage away from the pubic bone. And breathing deep and slow here rhythmically. A little bit of movement is okay, but definitely we want to keep the static stretching. We're going to take this into a little bit of a hamstring contraction. So my left elbow is directly underneath my left shoulder, and that's helping keep my chest lifted somewhat. And I'm intentionally keeping my low belly in. Now I'm going to squeeze that heel in towards the buttock, and I'm slowly going to let the right hand up and stretch the right hand up to the sky and maybe even a little bit back, looking up to the sky as well. Still squeezing that heel into the buttock of the back leg. Maybe there's a little bit of cramping. 3, 2, 1. Release. And then grabbing that ankle. If you cramped and you need to release and come back in, go ahead and do that. It takes training to stop that cramping from happening. We'll do it one more time. Breathing here, and then again, squeezing the heel in towards the buttock, releasing the hand slowly, stretching the arm up, maybe even a little bit back, maybe even letting the head fall back. Pointing the toe of the bent knee leg here and really squeezing that heel in. 3, 2, and 1. Releasing, grabbing the foot, and then slowly allowing that foot to come down to the ground. Taking a hamstring stretch here in whatever way that feels good, and then we're going to take a little bit of a splits variation, still staying on this side of the body. So if you want to come forward over that right leg, if you chose the right leg first, a little bit of a stretch here, smoothing out the breath, and then lift yourself up. So depending on where you are in your splits variation, if you're feeling a little warm and you want to come straight into it, go ahead. If you need to come into a half splits variation and stay there, that's also okay. I have a deep split, so I'm going to come right into it. I'm not going to worry about a back bend today. I'm going to point the front toe, and then I'm just going to allow myself to rest here. Remember, we're just doing some straight stretching, static stretching. So sometimes you may want to contract and then come in, or take your time coming in, but just come to your deepest point now. Find some rest. If your deepest point doesn't look like mine, maybe it's more of a half split, you can always take a block, placing it right under the belly of the hamstring, and then the hands can be onto the ground. Or if you have a few blocks, maybe the hand can come, or the head can come down to a block and you can rest here. Just finding your point and sinking into it. We'll stay about 10 more of my breaths, slowing your breath down and taking your time here. It's funny, in exercise physiology, they talk about flexibility and losing our flexibility as we get older. And so then we want to know, well, what is the best way to maintain flexibility? And actually, the best way science has told us to maintain flexibility is to static stretch. So to find your deepest position and then hold there for about 30 seconds. And that is the way to make flexibility gains. Not necessarily strength or mobility gains, but flexibility gains. So we don't want just one, though. We want a combination, and that's really full-bodied health. A few more breaths here. If it feels good on these last few breaths and you want to take that quad stretch again, you can always bend that back knee and bring the heel in towards the buttock. Again, think about lifting the rib cage away from the pubic bone, so not hanging here too collapsed down, but uplifted. 3, 2, and 1. Whatever depth you're in, take your time, maybe counting to 5 as you slowly come out of that depth. 3, 4, and 5. Move around a little bit here in any way that feels good for you, and then we'll go to the other side. Really focusing on the shoulders and the pelvis and freeing these connection points with the limbs from the body so that everything can move smoothly. In our traditional, maybe more traditional vinyasa or yoga asana practice, bringing the blocks back next to you. And now I started with my right leg, so my left leg is going to come forward. I'm going to start in that low lunge. And just a nice deep lunge here. First, really just feeling into that back hip, moving around a little bit. Thinking again about lifting the low ribs away from the pubic bone. Then bring that block back so that you have some space next to the leg and start to open and close that hip. A little mobility work. It's funny, the road here has been closed for a long time in front of our house, but people don't really listen, so they're driving on it anyway. So it's busy today, Sunday morning here on the island of Bonaire. Okay, and then bring that leg back in. Let's see, and then go ahead and come all the way down to the ground. So we'll start here with a little quad stretch. I actually can't remember if we did the flossing already on the other side or if we did the flossing after this. So whatever we did on the other side, it may not be the same as this side, but it's okay because we will hit every point. Allowing that knee to be tucked in towards the armpit as much as possible, really pressing the whole bottom of the foot down into the ground on that left side. And then we'll take a quad stretch here, stack the elbow directly underneath the shoulder, and then bend that that right leg and bring the heel in towards the outer buttock. Lift the chest, lift the ribs away from the pubic bone. Stay neutral on that front leg. Breathing here. And then we're going to do the same thing, squeezing the heel in towards the buttock. Lift that left arm up, lean back, look up, hold here, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. You may be cramping. It's okay. And then exhale, reach and grab, squeeze, hold. And then one more time. Open, squeeze, point the toes, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. 3, 2, 1, and then exhale. Coming back into a hamstring stretch of your choice here, and we'll do a little bit of leg flossing. It was the different order. One thing I always loved about yoga was that it really forced me to pay attention to my feet. And how much I paid attention to my feet was representative of how distracted I was in a practice, in a class. Okay, so that left foot stays forward, tuck those back toes under, and then just in and out here a few times. Fast or slow. Whatever feels good. Beautiful butterfly. And maybe on that next time that the legs are straight, you want to take a little movement, always thinking about that rib cage and freeing the rib cage from the body. So much of our flexibility is lost there. And then coming back down into the low lunge and preparing for your splits position. So if you're in a half split or a full split, whatever you're in, finding that for yourself, and then coming all the way to your depth. Maybe you're able to take a forward fold, and if yes, that's great. We're going to hold here for a little while. It's an unusual busy morning on my street. And then smooth, deep breathing. Maybe it feels good to rock in and out. And just noticing how free that front leg is, how able you are to move it around inside of the hip socket, that large femur bone. And then if it feels good, these last few breaths, maybe you want to bend that back leg and squeeze the heel in. This is a more challenging side for me. Keep the rib cage lifting up and away, and the chin is in neutral. The head is not taking, it's not so heavy on the spine. The neck isn't tense. Slowly release. Take a 5 count to come out. Easy, easy here. 3, 4, 5, and then any movements that feel good for you. We're going to move right into another quad stretch. I feel like you really cannot stretch the quads enough. So go ahead and come to a seated position, and then I'll start with the left leg. Take the left leg back into half hero's pose. So by that I mean that the left heel is just grazing the outer left buttock and the knee is bent. If this is very challenging for you, you just come back to your maximum and that right leg stays bent. If you have a lot of flexibility and you really want to get deep in the posture, then you lie all the way back, and you can see here I'm going to get a little posterior pelvic tilt as I tuck the tailbone towards the pubic bone. And then if that feels good, I'm going to bend that right knee and bring the right knee in. And then we can just hang out here. I don't know what you're looking at right now, but I'm looking at a beautiful blue sky. Yesterday on the island, it rained all day long, unusual. But this morning it's nice and sunny. But luckily we have enough cloud cover that it's not so overwhelming. The island can get really hot. Why am I telling you all this? Well, maybe I'm distracting your mind a little bit from the discomfort, and you're able to maintain the stretch a little longer. Feel what feels good here, and maybe it even feels good to straighten that right leg. If you straighten that right leg, think here, my left knee really wants to lift, so I'm going to keep that left knee down and stretch that right foot up. A few more breaths here. 5, 4, 3, 2, bend the knee, and then set that foot back down. Help yourself up in any way that you need to, and extract that left leg. Stretch it out a little bit, opening and closing the back of the knee joint, and we'll go to the opposite side, taking the right leg back into a half hero's pose, half virasana. The heel just grazes the outer buttock, and then come back at your comfort. Remember, we're finding our max stretch position, and then we're going to hold there at our end range of motion. So posteriorly tucking the tailbone and tilting the pelvis so that it's slightly tipped forward, or I guess actually it's tipped backwards, but the tailbone moves forward. And then if this is good for you and you feel like bending the left knee and hugging it in, go ahead and do that. It's much more challenging for me on this side. Always thinking about keeping the knee that's on the ground, trying not to let it lift here. And then smoothing out the breath rhythm, letting that be your point of focus. I wish you could see this beautiful sky. I don't know, maybe even hear the birds. Honestly, I don't normally talk about the amount of traffic that I have here, but it is a lot today for a Sunday on the island. If you know the island, then you know Sundays here are notoriously quiet days. The weekends are not busy. Bonaire is a special place in the world where time off is still really precious, and people take it as much as they can. If this feels good and you want to straighten that left leg, a lot harder for me on this side without keeping that right knee onto the ground. So find what works for you. I'm using my left elbow and I'm pressing that left elbow into the ground to leverage me so that I can keep pushing the right knee down. Find what's right for you. Stretching here, smoothing out the breath. 5, 4, 3, 2, and then bend the knee and replace the foot to the ground, lifting yourself up, coming out and extracting that right leg, and then just opening and closing the knee a few times here. And let's come into a straddle. Come into a seated straddle, stretching the legs. They don't have to be so far apart. It's not your wide leg split position. We'll do a frog hold in a a moment here, taking the flesh of the buttocks and moving it out of the way, and then pointing the toes or flexing the feet, whatever feels good. Just make sure the kneecap is facing up towards the sky. For a few breaths, just stretch from side to side. Maybe you are in the morning also, and you're just finding a little bit of movement in the body. So not forcing anything just yet, taking your time. I'm on a little hill, so it seems like I'm more flexible than I am. Maybe even a little cat-cow as you undulate the spine just slightly, lifting the ribs and closing the ribs off. And then we'll do a few seated good mornings. So put the hands right at the root of the thigh. Let the shoulders be relaxed down. The chin, chest stays lifted. We're just going to do 8 times. You'll inhale here. Exhale, come forward and down, and then right back up. Keep the quadricep muscles active and engaged, the kneecap facing up towards the sky. That's 3 for me. Maybe you're at a different pace. 4, 5, 6, 7. On the 8th one, we're going to hold. On the 8th one, hold. Point the toes here if it feels good. Arms can release. Arms can even stretch forward. 5, 4, 3, 2, and then come into your maximum position. Coming to rest all the way down towards the ground. Toes are pointed or flexed. Whatever feels great. Remembering the kneecaps up towards the sky. Listen here, many people don't have this kind of depth in their straddle. If that's you, it's a great idea to take those blocks and put them underneath the hands. If you have a lot of rounding in the spine, just simply press down and think to lift the rib cage up and away. And maybe you even want to take those hands and stretch them to the angle of the mat, keeping the chest lifted and away, pressing the hands into the blocks here. And then what you do is you get some elevation in the chest so that it's not collapsing, and some lengthening in the back body without overdoing. So find what's right for you. Relax here for a few breaths. Noticing where you may be feeling any discomfort and just breathing into those areas. We actually want to welcome the discomfort because it's a gateway towards our increased capacity. So as soon as we find that we meet that discomfort, then we see, okay, right away I know that I'm growing because I'm hitting my boundary. Love this idea of thinking about like pushing up against the boundaries of lived experience. And for me, that visualization is really helpful because as soon as I get to something that hurts or feels pressure or pushback, then I know I'm just about to expand my own boundaries. And that's what most of us are looking for, even if we don't know it, an expansion, a growth. Stay here a few more breaths. And then hands come underneath the shoulders or wherever you are, they come up, and then take your hands to the outer knees. And this just helps you keep that knee safe, that knee joint safe as you bring the legs all the way together. Let's do just a straight hamstring stretch here. You can come forward to your maximum just right away. If you're really feeling this in the lower back, have the legs spread apart. You can even place a block underneath the forehead. And that's okay. I'm going to bring my feet all the way together, and I'm even going to point my toes. And then I'm going to stretch out here. If the face looks down towards the legs, then it actually increases the rounding of the back body. So if that's an issue for you, keep looking forward towards the big toes, observing the feet here as much as possible and recognizing that the positioning of the feet, if they're rotated in or rotated out, is giving you some information about the health of the hip. And so observing where the hip may be overly internally or externally rotated and trying to make some corrections there with the soft tissue elements of the body, the ligaments. Always a space for quiet. When the quiet comes, maybe you really can savor it. It's a technique I like to use is to talk quite a bit so that when the silence hits, it's more observable. Allow the face to relax and soften. Remember, it's always okay if you don't have much depth here, if you don't have so much flex forward extension, then you just keep the hands on the ground, and your role is to lift the rib cage up and away. So finding what's best for you, not pushing too far. If we push outside of our boundaries and limits too early, then we have injury, whether that's mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological. So we want to push up to our boundary, and then we want to hang out there. And as we hang out there, we invite our boundary to open and expand in a safe way. Finish the exhale. Inhale, rise all the way up. We're just going to do two more stretches here. The first stretch we'll do is a frog pose. So you can find a nice comfortable position for the knees. So if you need to put some support underneath the knees, I'm trying to think which is the best way for me to get so you can see me. I'm just going to be on the side. So I'm going to spread my knees apart. I'm going to stack my ankles just directly below my knees and bring my elbows onto the ground. The elbows onto the ground, they're under the shoulders are a little bit closer, and then I push into the elbows as though they're moving forward so that I can move back into the hip joint maximum. And you can play here with lifting one foot and lifting the other just a few times so you really feel like you're getting into the hips and moving forward and back a little bit, warming up. But then press into your boundary, press into that point where you're at your deepest or max range of motion, and then we're going to hold there. Keeping the face relaxed and soft. Now's the time to really focus on slowing the breath and smoothing it out. So extending maybe the exhalations a little bit longer than the inhalations, and looking for a really rhythmic breath experience. Maybe this is your least favorite stretch or it's your most favorite stretch. It doesn't really matter. Try to find a neutral mindset about it. It's not about, is it a good stretch or a bad stretch in your mind, but is it a stretch that's actually having a benefit to you, whether it feels good or not. Pressing down through the inner knees. Make sure you have a soft surface there so you can easily press down. Keep the low belly in. When I tuck the low belly in, it activates my Mula Bandha, if you're familiar with that. Maybe you notice that here as well. Just a few more breaths. Remember, you don't have to hold these deep end range of motion flexibility stretches very long. The scientific literature says about 30 seconds is good to increase flexibility. So don't overdo. Unless your tendency is to underdo, then maybe overdo a little bit. If your tendency is to overdo already, underdo. We're going to come out really slowly. Take your time here. I said we're only going to do 2 more stretches, but because I'm getting the benefit here also, I'm going to take us through 2 more stretches now before just a little mini shavasana. Actually, I have to hurry because my partner has to go teach, and I'm sure he's getting anxious. So let the toes be tucked or untucked, whatever feels good. We'll take a little puppy pose here. The hips stay stacked over the knees, and then the arms stretch forward. The arms can be wide apart or narrow, whatever feels best. You can be on the fingertips or all the way down onto the hands. Maybe the forehead has to be on the ground and the chin stays tucked, but if you have the flexibility and openness, you're just simply going to bring the chin forward and then bring the armpits down, and eventually the chest comes down, and you'll rest here. Maybe you can't rest here yet. This pose for me was hard until it wasn't. And once it stopped being challenging, it started being really exciting. And so now this is a stretch I particularly love. A few more breaths. rising yourself up, coming out slowly. Let's just reverse some of the forward momentum that we've created so far. Taking your 2 blocks. And actually, I'm gonna take one. You can put this block in its lowest, medium, or its highest position. I'm gonna show it from its highest position here, doing a little back opener or chest opener, excuse me. I'm gonna place it between and at the base of the shoulder blades. My legs are going to be straight and all the way together. And then I'm gonna take my arms overhead. If you find that this is too much, excuse me, onto the head and neck, then you can always take a block and place it underneath the head. Sometimes I have to use my hands to help me lift my head and neck back up, but actually, especially as I get older and older, I really want to minimize that because I'm looking to strengthen the neck. And then the arms can stretch overhead, the elbows can be interlaced, whatever feels best for you. We're going to hang out here for a little bit. Few more breaths. And then taking the hands to the head and gently guiding the chin back up towards the chest and removing yourself off of the block. If you're like me and you have wooden blocks, maybe it's challenging to hold that position. I'm going to flip around here and show you an option. We'll just take a little savasana. Remember, this is supposed to be a relaxing experience and practice, so nothing too insane. I love the wooden blocks. I'm going to place them right underneath the shoulder blades. Let the heels of the feet be apart from each other and the inner edges of the feet open. And then a block right underneath the back of the head. So I'm getting a little chest opening here as I rest in Shavasana. This is not necessary. But if it feels good for you and it's something that you want to play with, I encourage it. And that's just because we're not taking a traditional yoga class today. We're just simply getting some body awareness, opening, flexibility, and also some relaxation. We know from the scientific literature that it takes as little as one full body stretch, held for just a few seconds, to actually invite in parasympathetic activation, which is this activation of the rest and digest system. So take a little mental note there, recognizing that if you're feeling any stress or overactivated stress arousal, then you can always just take a quick stretch and notice how that affects your response. Letting the eyes soften and the skin of the face relax completely here. And then letting yourself go, releasing the desire to do more, and simply allowing the body to fully release. Take as much time as you need here. Hopefully your autoplay is off and you can relax. If you have the time, take it. Because one day in life you won't have the time and you'll wish that you had taken it when you had it. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Saraswati. Until next time, live mindfully, be well. Namaste.